Hi everybody, today let's do a chapter from class 10 first flight, and the chapter's name is From the Diary of Anne Frank. Just as the name suggests, From the Diary of Anne Frank, we can clearly understand that this chapter is an extract from a diary of a girl whose name was Anneliese Mary Anne Frank. Anne Frank died at the age of 16 because she suffered from typhus. But when she was 13 years old, she was gifted a diary. She considered this diary as her best friend and named her Kitty. And in that diary, she jotted down her life's incidents. This chapter is obviously an extract of her writings, and here the narrator is Anne herself. Let's read and understand this chapter, after which I will summarize. Then we'll do significance of the title, the moral of the story, and the question answers as usual. In this chapter, under the section before you read, it gives a lot of information about her. So I'll straight away start reading before you read so that we get some information about Anne Frank. Now let's jump in and start with the session. Anneliese Mary Anne Frank, 12 June 1929 to February or March 1945, was a German-born Jewish girl who wrote while in hiding with her family and 4 friends in Amsterdam during the German occupation of the Netherlands in World War II. Her family had moved to Amsterdam after the Nazis gained power in Germany, but were trapped when the Nazi occupation extended into Netherlands. As persecutions against the Jewish population increased, the family went into hiding in July 1942 in hidden rooms in her father Otto Frank's office building. After 2 years in hiding, the group was betrayed and transported to the concentration camp system, where Anne died of typhus in Bergen-Belsen within days of her sister Margaret Frank. Typhus is a disease which is caused by a bacteria through the bite of infected mite, fleas, or lice. Now, in this part, we can know that Anneliese, which is the full name of Anne Frank, was born on 12 June 1929. She was a German-born Jewish girl who wrote this diary when she was hiding with her family and 4 friends in Amsterdam, and this time was during German occupation. When German came to Netherlands in World War II, they were homebound. They had to hide in their homes just to save their lives. Her family had moved to Amsterdam after Nazis gained power in Germany, but they were all trapped in the home. And as persecution means ill treatments against the Jewish population was increasing because Anne Frank was a Jewish person. So to avoid those ill treatment or that violence against Jewish people, this family went into hiding in July 1942 in one of the rooms of father's office building. Father's name was Otto Frank. There they hid for about 2 years, and then after that this entire group was betrayed. It was cheated by someone and it was transported to the concentration camp. But what happened there in the concentration camp was that Anne Frank got infected by this bacteria, which happened due to the bite of mite or fleas or lice. So she was infected by typhus and she died there. But before her death, her sister Margaret Frank also died. So both the sisters lost their lives in that camp. Her father Otto, the only survivor of the group, returned to Amsterdam after the war ended to find that her diary had been saved. Convinced that it was a unique record, he took action to have it published in English under the name The Diary of a Young Girl. The diary was given to Anne Frank on her 13th birthday and chronicles the events of her life from 12 June 1942 until its final entry in 1st August 1944. It was eventually translated from its original Dutch into many languages and became one of the world's most widely read books. There have also been several films, television, and theatrical productions, and even an opera based on the diary. Described as the work of a mature and insightful mind, the diary provides an intimate examination of daily life under Nazi occupation. Anne Frank has become one of the most renowned and discussed of the Holocaust victims. After the death of the two daughters, that is Anne Frank and Margaret Frank, their father Otto went back to Amsterdam. And there in Amsterdam, he got hold of the diary which Anne used to write during that time when they were hiding in the office. This diary had unique records of all the days, her feelings when she was there. So the father decided that since it was a unique record, he will get it published in English under the title The Diary of a Young Girl. This diary was given to Anne Frank on her 13th birthday, and inside this diary, she had written all the events which are arranged in time, in order of time, from 12 June 1942 till 1st August of 1944. It was translated into many languages and it became most widely read books. Many films, TV productions, or in fact operas were also created which were based on this diary. Opera is a dramatic work with music and singers. Whatever Anne described in that diary, it was termed as a very matured and insightful mind. Insightful means which shows deep understanding. Because during that time there was a lot of destruction going on all around. And how did she manage to save her life then? What problems did she face when this entire Holocaust was going on? How was she victimized? Everything was given in that diary. And therefore, this diary was very interesting. It was very precious for her father Otto, and so it was given for publishing. And after the diary was published, it was widely known and acknowledged. Writing in a diary is a really strange experience for someone like me, not only because I have never written anything before, but also because it seems to me that later on neither I nor anyone else will be interested in the musings of a 13-year-old schoolgirl. Musings means a period of reflection or thought. Oh well, it doesn't matter. I feel like reading and I have an even greater need to get all kinds of things off my chest. Get something off my chest is an idiom which means to share something with someone, to share the inner feelings with someone. Paper has more patience than people. I thought of this saying on one of those days when I was feeling a little depressed and was sitting at home with my chin in my hands, bored and listless. Listless means with no energy or interest, wondering whether to stay in or go out. I finally stayed where I was brooding. Brooding means feeling sad. Yes, paper does have more patience, and since I'm not planning to let anyone else read the stiff backed notebook, grandly referred to as diary, unless I should ever find a real friend, it probably won't make a bit of difference. Now, I'm back to the point that prompted me to keep a diary in the first place. I don't have a friend. The extract of the diary starts from this paragraph, and everywhere I means Anne Frank because she is writing this diary. So she starts with this thought that writing in a diary was strange for her because she had never written a diary, and she thought that who would be interested in the happenings of a 13-year-old schoolgirl. After some time or in future, neither she herself nor anyone else would show any interest. But she felt that it doesn't matter because she wanted to share certain things with some, and she always thought that paper has more patience than people. That if someone is sharing something with us, we may become impatient after a while. But if we are writing something, or if the person is writing something on paper, the paper is never impatient like people, like human beings. It can take away whatever you want to throw in it. So that is why she feels that paper has more patience than people. She had this thought when she was little depressed. She sat at home and she was quite bored and listless. She was wondering whether she should stay in or go out. And then finally she decided, sadly, that she will stay in. Paper does have more patience, and then she started to plan on writing that diary, unless she found a best friend. She had many friends, but she could not call anyone as her real friend with whom she could share her feelings. So, something inside her prompted that she should write the diary immediately because she didn't have a friend. Let me put it more clearly, since no one will believe that a 13-year-old girl is completely alone in the world. And I'm not. I have loving parents and a 16-year-old sister, and there are about 30 people I can call friends. I have a family, loving aunts, and a good home. No, on the surface, I seem to have everything except my one true friend. All I think about when I am with friends is having a good time. I can't bring myself to talk about anything but ordinary, everyday things. We don't seem to be able to get any closer, and that's the problem. Maybe it is my fault that we don't confide in each other. Confide means trust, to tell personal things privately to a person that one trusts. In any case, that's just how things are. And unfortunately, they are not liable to change. Liable means likely to change. This is why I have started the diary. To enhance the image of this long awaited friend in my imagination. Enhance means improve. I don't want to jot down the facts in this diary the way most people would do. Jot down means write. But I want the diary to be my friend, and I'm going to call this friend Kitty. In this paragraph, Anne Frank explains a bit about her family. She had loving parents and a 16-year-old sister, whom we come to know that her name was Margaret and father's name was Otto. She had loving aunts and she had a good home. So, all in all, she was very happy. She also had about 30 friends, but none of the friends was her best friend. Whenever she was with her friends, she could talk about anything, but that anything would consist of everyday things. There was not a single person with whom she could share her innermost feelings or confide in her or trust in her. So that's how things were. And unfortunately, even though she could talk, she could mingle, mix up with others, she could not open up her heart with anyone. And therefore, she decided to start writing that diary. She considered this diary as her best friend and she named it as Kitty. And she also decided that she'll not write down in this diary as most people do, but she'll write it in a different manner. Since no one would understand a word of my stories to Kitty if I were to plunge right in, plunge means jump or start right in, I would better provide a brief sketch of my life, much as I dislike doing so. My father, the most adorable father I have ever seen, adorable means lovable, didn't marry my mother until he was 36 and she was 25. My sister Margaret was born in Frankfurt in Germany in 1926. I was born on 12 June 1929. I lived in Frankfurt until I was 4. My father emigrated to Holland in 1933. Emigrated means left one's country to settle in some other country. My mother, Edith Hollander Frank, went with him to Holland in September, while Margaret and I were sent to Aachen to stay with our grandmother. Margaret went to Holland in December and I followed in February. When I was plunked down on the table as a birthday present for Margot. Plunked down, which is an informal word, means put down in a casual way. Now that Anne had decided to write this diary, she thought that instead of writing the day's events just right then, she should give a small bio sketch or a small history of her life so that the reader would understand. Because she wanted to write it in a different way, so she thought about this idea. In the next paragraph, she tells brief incidents of her life when she was a little child. Her father was very lovable and he married her mother when he was 36 and mother was 25. Her sister Margaret was born in Frankfurt in Germany in 1926, and after that Anne was born on 12 June 1929. Till she was 4 years old, they all lived in Frankfurt, and after that her father went to Holland in 1933. Her mother, Edith Hollander Frank, which was her name, also followed him there in September. But Margaret and Anne stayed with their grandmother in Aachen. Margaret went to Holland in December, and after that Anne went there in February. I started right away at the Montessori Nursery School. I stayed there until I was 6, at which time I started in the first form. Here form means standard or class. In the 6th form, my teacher was Mrs. Cupris, the headmistress. At the end of the year, we were both in tears as we said a heartbreaking farewell. In the summer of 1941, Grandma fell ill and had to have an operation, so my birthday passed with little celebration. Grandma died in January 1942. No one knows how often I think of her and still love her. This birthday celebration in 1942 was intended to make up for the other. Intended means planned, and Grandma's candle was lit along with the rest. The 4 of us are still doing well, and that brings me to the present date of 20th June 1942 and the solemn dedication of my diary. Solemn dedication means sincere commitment to something. Anne Frank further adds about her childhood that she started with Montessori Nursery School there in Holland right away. She stayed there until she was 6 or 6 years old, and by that time she had already gone to the first standard. In the 6th standard, she had a teacher whose name was Mrs. Cupris, who was also the headmistress. And when Anne Frank left that school, they both cried because they both were very attached to each other. It was the summer of 1941 when Anne's grandma fell ill. She had to undergo an operation. So that year her birthday passed with very little celebration, in a very simple manner. In January 1942, her grandma died. But she could not tell anyone how much she loved her and how much she thought about her. She missed her grandma very much. And in the same year when Anne's birthday arrived, the celebration was really just planned to make up for the other people. But along with the other candles of the birthday, Grandma's candle was also lit. All 4 of them after that were doing very well. And now she comes to the present date of diary writing, that is 20th June 1942. She had sincerely committed to write this diary, and now the first diary entry given in this chapter will start. Let's read what she has written. Saturday, 20th June 1942. Dearest Kitty. This is where she starts writing her diary. Our entire class is quaking in its boots. Quaking in its boots means shaking with fear and nervousness. The reason, of course, is the forthcoming meeting in which teachers decide who'll move up to the next form and who'll be kept back. Half the class is making bets. GN and I laugh ourselves silly at the 2 boys behind us. GN is the name of Anne's friend. CN and Jax, who have staked their entire holiday savings on their bet. Cian and Jax are two boys who were sitting behind Anne and her friend. Staked means bet. From morning to night, it is you're going to pass? No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Even G's pleading glances and my angry outbursts can't calm them down. Pleading glances means look to make a request, and outburst means sudden release of emotions or anger. If you ask me, there are so many dummies that about a quarter of the class should be kept back. Dummies means which are very stupid in the studies, not doing so good in studies. But teachers are the most unpredictable creatures on earth. Unpredictable means changeable. I'm not so worried about my girlfriends and myself. We'll make it. The only subject I'm not sure about is maths. Anyway, all we can do is wait. Until then, we keep telling each other not to lose heart. Not to lose heart means not to be discouraged. 20th June was when Anne Frank started to write her diary, which she had named Kitty. And on that day, she mentions in her diary that on that day, the entire class was very fearful, it was very nervous. The reason was that teachers were going to tell the result, that who would go to the next standard and who would be left behind in the same one. Half of the class were making bets who would make it and who would not. Anne's friend named Gian, which is mentioned here as Gian, they both were laughing at two boys who were sitting behind them. Those two boys were named as Cian and Jax. They both were having a bet on the entire holiday savings so as to who will pass and who will fail. From morning to night. In other words, the entire time they were just arguing with each other who would pass and who would fail. And this made Anne and her friend Gian very angry. They tried to keep them shut, but they could not. Anne also very frankly expresses here that a quarter of the class were not good at studies, that they should not be promoted in the next class. But she also said that teachers are very unpredictable, they can change their mind anytime. She was not worried about her result and not even worried about her own friend's result. She knew that they all will make it to the next standard. The only subject which she was fearful of was maths. And all they could do was just to wait for the results to arrive, and they kept telling each other not to be disappointed and be positive. I get along pretty well with my teachers. There are 9 of them, 7 men and 2 women. Mr. Keesing, the old fogey who teaches maths, was annoyed with me for ages because I talked too much. Old fogey means an old fashioned person, and annoyed means angry. After several warnings, he assigned me extra homework, an essay on the subject, a chatterbox. Chatterbox means a talkative person. A chatterbox. What can you write about that? I would worry about that later, I decided. I jotted down the title in my notebook, tucked it in my bag, and tried to keep quiet. That evening, after I had finished the rest of my homework, the note about the essay caught my eye. I began thinking about the subject while chewing the tip of my fountain pen. Anyone could ramble on and leave big spaces between the words. Ramble on means talk or write aimlessly for long. But the trick was to come up with convincing arguments to prove the necessity of talking. Convincing argument is a statement made in such a manner that people believe it. I thought, and suddenly I had an idea. I wrote the 3 pages Mr. Keesing had assigned me and was satisfied. So we find here that Anne Frank was doing pretty well in academics. She was not afraid of any teacher except her maths teacher. And she was getting pretty well with all her teachers. There were 9 of them, 7 men and 2 women. and one of them was Mr. Keesing, who was her maths teacher. He was an old fashioned person and he was very annoyed because Anne Frank was very talkative in the class. So, after several warnings when she did not keep quiet, he assigned her an extra homework. And that extra homework was that she had to write an essay on the subject a chatterbox. So she decided that she'll think on the points later on. She kept that note in the bag. In the evening, when she finished her homework, that note about the essay caught her eye and she began to think what she can write. Now, anybody could have written anything just to fill up the gap and just for the sake of writing. But she wanted to write such arguments, such convincing statements that someone should believe why talking is necessary. And she wanted to convince that to her teacher. So she thought, and suddenly she came up with so many ideas that she could write at least 3 pages and was satisfied. I argued that talking is a student's trait. Trait means characteristic feature, a character, and that I would do my best to keep it under control, but that I would never be able to cure myself of the habit since my mother talked as much as I did, if not more, and that there is not much you can do about inherited traits. Inherited traits means qualities that one gets from one's parents. Mr. Keesing had a good laugh at my arguments, but when I proceeded to talk my way through the next lesson, he assigned me a second essay. Proceeded means began. This time it was supposed to be on an incorrigible chatterbox. Incorrigible means something that cannot be corrected, usually a bad quality. I handed it in, and Mr. Keesing had nothing to complain about for 2 whole lessons. However, during the third lesson, he had finally had enough. Anne Frank, as punishment for talking in class, write an essay entitled Quack, 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 said Mistress Chatterbox. Anne Frank, in her essay, tried to give that it is a quality of student to talk. She tries to keep it under control, but she can never be cured herself because she has inherited that quality, taken that quality from her mother, and no one can help those inherited qualities. When Mr. Keesing saw her essay, he laughed, and then when he started to move on through the next lesson, he assigned her another essay, which was titled as An Incorrigible Chatterbox, means a chatterbox about which nothing can be done. So Anne was very intelligent. She handed that essay again to Mr. Keesing, and Mr. Keesing was again happy with the essay. He had nothing to complain about. The next 2 whole lessons went by without the maths teacher giving Anne any kind of extra homework. But during the third lesson, he could not contain himself. He could not tolerate the talkative nature of Anne, and then he, as a punishment, gave her to write another essay which was titled as Quack, 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 said Mistress Chatterbox. It was a very humorous title, and he had expected that maybe Anne will not be able to write, she'll learn her mistake, but she hadn't been learning her mistake and she was only talking and talking throughout. The class roared. Roared means laughed. I had to laugh too, though I had nearly exhausted my ingenuity on the topic of chatterboxes. Exhausted means used up, and ingenuity means originality or inventiveness. It was time to come up with something else, something original. My friend San, who's good at poetry, offered to help me write the essay from beginning to end in verse. Verse is a poem. And I jumped for joy. Mr. Keesing was trying to play a joke on me with this ridiculous subject. Ridiculous means absurd, stupid. But I would make sure the joke was on him. I finished my poem and it was beautiful. It was about a mother duck and a father swan with 3 baby ducklings who were bitten to death by the father because they quacked too much. Luckily, Mr. Keesing took the joke the right way. He read the poem to the class, adding his own comments, and to several other classes as well. Since then, I've been allowed to talk and haven't been assigned any extra homework. On the contrary, Mr. Keesing's always making jokes these days. Yours, Anne. When the entire class heard the title of the essay, they all laughed, and Anne also laughed. But though Anne had already used up all her creativity in writing the other two essays, she was now thinking on what next to think of or how to write this essay, which would come up very original. So her friend San, who was good at poetry, suggested her that she should write this in the form of a poem. And Mr. Keesing definitely was trying to play a joke on her. He was trying to make fun of her by giving such a subject. But Anne was so clever that she made sure that this joke was on him, not on her. So finally, Anne finished her poem. It came out to be beautiful, in which she talked that there was a mother duck and a father swan with three baby ducklings, and this father swan killed the ducklings because they quacked too much. Luckily, when Mr. Keesing saw this poem, he took this joke right away. He was not angry or offended. He read this poem to the class. He added his own comments to it, and also he read this same poem to other classes as well. And after that day, Anne was always allowed to talk. She was never given an assignment or any kind of extra homework. And on the other hand, Mr. Keesing was always seen making joke those days. This was the diary entry which Anne wrote on that day. She shares this incident of her class which happened with her maths teacher, and this incident was a very humorous and a very interesting one. Through the Before You Read section, we understand that Anne Frank was a German Jewish girl who lived in Amsterdam with her family. But when Nazis started to occupy Netherlands, they all had to hide because there was violence all around. So Anne Frank's family and 4 of her friends hid in their house for 2 years. And during these 2 years, she wrote her diary. But her diary writing was not like usual people do, their everyday chores or their everyday thoughts. It was something different. It had to be very interesting. And that's what Anne had in her mind when she started writing this. Now, after 2 years of hiding, they were transported. In fact, they were cheated and they were transported to a camp where her sister, Margot Frank, died of an infection, and after 2 weeks, she too died of typhus. After this tragic death, when her father Otto went back to their Amsterdam home, he got hold of Anne's diary. When he read through, he thought that it should be published just to give a tribute to her, and that's what happened. When the diary was published, it was well known, it was popular throughout the world. Her writings were also translated in many other languages, and people came to know about her writing talent only after her death. That was very sad. Now let's move on to the main chapter. At the beginning of this chapter, she mentions that this diary came to her when she was 13 years old. She had a very loving family. She had many friends, but she did not have a friend whom she could call her best friend or she could really confide into. So she thought, or she took this diary as her best friend, and she named it Kitty. Her father's name was Otto, who was a very lovable and an adorable person. Her mother's name was Edith. She had an elder sister named Margaret, and she had a grandma to whom she was very attached. In 1942, her grandma died. She was very attached to her grandma and missed her every day. And that was the year when she was gifted with this diary, and she thought of starting to write in this diary. In this chapter, we find one of her writings on the day of 20th June 1942, wherein she has described an incident of her class
That day the result was to be out and all the children were very nervous. Anne Frank and her friends were not nervous because they all knew that they'll make it, except for one subject which Anne Frank was really fearful of, and that was maths. Her maths teacher used to constantly spank her, scold her for being very talkative. Once it happened that he gave her an assignment as a punishment to write an essay on the topic, a chatterbox. Now Anne took it very seriously and she wanted to give convincing arguments as to why talking is a very comfortable trait of every student. Now, she also mentions here that something which is inherited cannot be cured. So there was no cure for her talkative attitude or her characteristic trait. So when Mr. Keesing saw this essay, he burst into laughter. And next day again he gave another essay to write on the topic, an incorrigible chatterbox, again as a punishment. And then again after 2-3 days she was given the same punishment, and this time the title was Quack Quack Quack, said Mistress Chatterbox. The entire class laughed at it, but she had now exhausted all her creativity, her innovativeness, and now she did not know how to write this essay so that it comes out in a beautiful manner. And just then her friend suggested her to write it in the form of a verse or poem. When she wrote it, Mr. Keesing liked it so much that he not only read it aloud in the class, but also in other classes as well. And since then, Mr. Keesing did not complain about her talkativeness. That was a very nice and interesting incident which she has mentioned in this chapter, and that is where the chapter ends. Now let's think about the significance of the title. Since we understand that this chapter is an extract from Anne Frank's diary, so this title from the diary of Anne Frank is very appropriate and suitable for this chapter. Here she has mentioned a few things about her family and also about an incident which happened in her class, which makes this chapter very interesting and easy to read. This chapter as such does not give us a moral, but the times when she wrote her diary were very difficult times. It was a time of war and violence. And what we can understand through this is during such difficult times, she tried to help her friends out by hiding them in her own house and taking that risk. Also, during those times, she was very hopeful and she tried to keep herself very happy. So all we can say that her diary motivates us to be positive in all the kind of difficult situations and also to stand up against violence and war, because it was those difficult times which led to her tragic death as well. Now with this general thought, I finish my session here. Do not forget to see the question answers that I'm going to flash in front of you. They will comprise of both thinking about the text and thinking about language. And I'll see you again in my next video where I'll take up a new topic. Till then, love and light to all of you, blessings and best wishes. Bye. God bless you.